Back in 1995, the average American home cost around $120,000, which works out to nearly $240,000 in today's dollars. A middle-class family could often qualify for a mortgage on just one income, something that feels almost impossible today. The dream of owning a modest home with a yard wasn't fantasy. It was simply the middle-class expectation. Median household income in 1995 hovered near $35,000, or about $70,000 today. That paycheck was enough to cover a roof overhead, 2 cars in the driveway, and maybe even a little tucked away in savings. Families weren't living like royalty, but they also didn't feel suffocated. For most, being middle class meant stability, and that alone felt more than enough. Gasoline averaged $1.10 a gallon back in 1995, which equals only about $2.20 today. Filling up the tank didn't drain your wallet, and it meant freedom weekend drives, road trips, highways without guilt. Families thought nothing of piling into the minivan and hitting the interstate back when gas prices didn't dictate travel plans. A brand new car in the mid-90s ran about $17,900, which equals roughly $38,000 today. Dependable sedans like the Ford Taurus or Honda Accord lined suburban driveways. They weren't built to impress. They were built to last, getting kids to school, parents to work, and the whole family on vacation. A doctor's visit in the 90s often cost $40 to $50, the equivalent of $80 to $100 today. Many people paid even less depending on their plan. You handed over cash at the counter, shook the nurse's hand, and left. No mystery bills, no endless paperwork, no portal logins. Just a visit, a check, and you were done. Long-distance phone calls still came with a price tag 10 to 15 cents a minute, about 50 cents to $1 today. Calling card commercials promised cheaper rates, but people still kept conversations shorter than they wanted. Chatting with relatives across the country felt special. You counted the minutes, not the megabytes. Renting a 2-bedroom apartment in 1995 cost about $550 a month, or around $1,100 today. Most middle-class families could handle that without too much strain. Renters didn't always have a backyard, but they had a kitchen table for family dinners and a living room couch, which was enough to feel secure. Public college tuition in 1995 averaged $2,800 a year, or about $6,000 in today's money. Families could often manage tuition with savings, part-time jobs, or modest loans. A 4-year degree didn't mean decades of crushing debt. Parents felt proud sending their kids to college, knowing it was financially doable. A trip to Disneyland in 1995 cost $35 for an adult ticket, around $70 today. For middle-class families, it was a stretch, but not impossible. You saved up, packed sandwiches in the cooler, and splurged on a few Mickey souvenirs. The magic wasn't about luxury pricing. It was about priceless family memories. Babysitting stayed a steady gig for middle-class teens, especially girls. A Friday night meant board games, popcorn, and some cash left on the kitchen counter. The pay wasn't huge, but it added up. Parents trusted neighborhood kids, and teens learned responsibility while earning spending money. Babysitting was as much a rite of passage as it was a job. Child care cost around $4,600 a year in 1995, equal to about $9,700 today. It was already one of the pricier middle-class expenses, but still nowhere near the staggering $1,500 to $2,000 per month families face now. Mortgage rates floated between 7 and 9% through much of the 90s. Sure, that was higher than today's recent lows, but houses were far cheaper. People complained about interest rates, but payments didn't swallow their whole paycheck. Middle-class families could buy a home, make the payments, and still live without today's crushing burden. In the early 90s, Internet access often ran about $9.95 a month, but only for 5 hours. Extra time meant extra charges. By 1996, AALA shifted to $19.95 for unlimited use, and suddenly the floodgates opened. Middle-class homes filled with the screech of dial-up tones and the thrill of hearing "You got mail" for the very first time. Groceries stayed steady and predictable. In 1995, a loaf of bread cost about $1.25. Milk was $2.85 a gallon, and eggs were just $1 a dozen. That's roughly $2.50, $5.70, and $2 today. Stocking the fridge didn't drain half a paycheck. Families could fill their carts with both basics and little treats, walking out without shaking their heads at the receipt. A movie ticket in 1995 went for about $4.35, equal to $9 today. Families could head to the theater on a Friday night without overthinking the budget. You'd grab a giant tub of popcorn, a fizzy soda, and sink into creaky seats. Movies weren't a splurge, they were simply affordable fun. Even fast food felt special. A McDonald's value meal in 1998 cost $4.50, or about $8.50 today. A burger, fries, and a drink in that red tray was a treat the whole family could enjoy without guilt. A first-class stamp in 1991 was 29 cents, about 65 cents today. Mailing letters was still part of everyday life bills, birthday cards, invitations. The mailbox was full, and every kitchen drawer seemed to hold a roll of stamps. Sending a note to a friend or relative was quick, normal, and part of the weekly rhythm. Friday night often meant a stop at Blockbuster, where VHS rentals cost just $2 or $3. Families wandered the aisles debating between comedies and action flicks, picking out candy at the counter. It was a ritual: movies, snacks, and maybe a late fee you'd grumble about on Monday. Affordable entertainment wrapped in the simple thrill of be kind. Rewind. Thanksgiving dinner for 10 people in 1995 cost under $30, about $60 today. Turkey, potatoes, pies, and cranberries came together without straining the budget. Families squeezed around crowded tables, football murmuring on TV, and the holiday felt less commercial. It was about food, family, and gratitude, not credit card bills. Middle-class style in the 90s carried its own look. Brand-name polo shirts, Gap khakis, and starter jackets marked you as in. No designer label required, just the right mall finds. Kids strutted down school hallways, showing off their logos. It wasn't high fashion, but for a middle-class family, it was enough to feel sharp and confident. By the 1990s, many families had graduated from one car to two. A dependable sedan handled the commute, while a minivan or SUV took care of family duties. 2 cars didn't mean luxury. It meant managing jobs, school runs, and grocery trips. Driveways full of vehicles told the story of busy suburban life. School lunch tables buzzed with Pokémon card trades. Charizard and holographic rares stole the spotlight while sandwiches went untouched. Kids flipped through binders like treasure chests, proudly showing off their collections. For many, those playground deals were their first lessons in business, bargaining, and sometimes heartbreak. Dodge Caravans and Ford Explorers became suburban icons. Caravans hauled little league teams and groceries, while Explorers added rugged flair to the driveway. Families washed them proudly in the yard on weekends. They weren't just cars. They were symbols of middle-class life, practical tools with a touch of pride. Gas-guzzling SUVs were considered an indulgence, but an affordable one thanks to cheap fuel. Nobody thought twice about filling a 20-gallon tank. The appeal wasn't efficiency, it was comfort, space, and safety. SUVs were a middle-class luxury families could justify without breaking the bank. Shopping trips revolved around malls, anchored by J.C. Penney, Sears, and Macy's. Families wandered food courts, browsed racks, and let kids hang out in arcades. The mall wasn't just for buying things, it was culture, community, and tradition. For middle-class families, Saturday at the mall was both errand and outing. Employer-sponsored health insurance averaged $5,300 a year in 1996, equal to about $11,000 today. That sounds steep, but it was far less than the $22,000 family premiums of today. Paperwork was simpler too. Most people had a plastic card and a booklet, and that was all you needed to know. Walmart expanded rapidly through the 90s, becoming the one-stop shop for middle-class families. It wasn't glamorous, but it stretched every dollar. Groceries, clothes, toys, even car supplies, all in one trip. For budget-conscious households, Walmart became the symbol of convenience and savings. By the late 90s, it had reshaped how America shopped. Catalogs still packed mailboxes. J.C.Penney, Spiegel, Sears, the thick books doubled as coffee table decor. Kids circled toys with markers, while parents flipped to appliances and clothing. It was shopping without leaving the couch, and for many families, the catalog hinted at what would be waiting under the Christmas tree. Kitchens in the 1990s carried their own middle-class charm. Tupperware stacked neatly, crock-pots simmering dinner, and shiny bread machines promising homemade loaves. Counters brimmed with gadgets designed to make meals easier. Every kitchen told the story of a family trying to balance convenience with comfort. Families in the 90s embraced convenience, but never abandoned tradition. Slow-cooked roasts, homemade bread, and neatly stacked leftovers filled kitchens. These weren't fancy spaces, they were functional and full. By the late 90s, nearly every household owned a microwave. What once felt like a luxury appliance had turned into a middle-class necessity. Leftovers reheated in minutes, frozen dinners came out steaming, and popcorn bags fueled family movie nights. The microwave may not have been glamorous, but for busy parents and hungry kids, it was indispensable. Hamburger helper and frozen TV dinners were budget-friendly staples of weeknight dining. Families leaned on them after late soccer practices or long shifts at work. They weren't gourmet, but they filled stomachs without emptying wallets. Every kitchen cupboard had a few boxes waiting, a quiet reminder that convenience had carved out its place in middle-class homes. Friday nights often meant pizza delivery. Domino's or Pizza Hut sparked playful debates, but everyone agreed it beat cooking. You'd call from the landline, wait 30 minutes, and then the doorbell rang. Hot boxes filled the air with that unmistakable smell, sodas cracked open, and suddenly the weekend felt official. For middle-class life, pizza night was one of the few luxuries everyone could count on. Suburban cul-de-sacs in the 90s came alive each evening with kids riding bikes, rollerblading, and playing tag until the streetlights blinked on. Parents sat on porches, chatting with neighbors, confident their children were safe nearby. Those looping streets became playgrounds without fences, communities built as naturally as kids pedaling down driveways. The glow of PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Sega Genesis lit up living rooms. Families saved for months to place one under the Christmas tree, and kids spent endless hours racing in Mario Kart or battling in Tekken. These consoles weren't just toys. They were badges of belonging, proof that your family was keeping pace with the times. Weekends revolved around Little League baseball and soccer fields. Parents packed minivans with folding chairs, beer, and orange slices, spending whole mornings cheering from the sidelines. Coolers rested under canopies, whistles blew, and campers clicked on. For kids, it was about sport. For parents, it was pride. Weekend schedules bent around games, anchoring middle-class family life. Schools in the 1990s still leaned on chalkboards, overhead projectors, and ditto machines. Teachers smelled faintly of chalk dust, and worksheets came out warm with purple ink. The technology wasn't flashy, but it worked. Parents trusted schools to teach the basics, while PTAs, bake sales, and fundraisers kept the community involved. Moms and dads baked brownies, sold raffle tickets, and organized carnivals. It wasn't just about money, it was about showing up and keeping schools strong. Saving for college in the 90s looked different. 529 plans and structured accounts hadn't yet taken hold. Most families leaned on modest savings, part-time jobs, or student loans. Parents hoped to help, but usually it meant covering a semester or two, not the entire bill. College felt expensive, but still within reach. Teachers carried deep respect in the 1990s. Parents trusted them, students listened, and schools often felt like extensions of the neighborhood. Parent-teacher conferences were more collaboration than confrontation. Middle-class families believed education mattered, and that teachers had the authority to guide it. Respect hadn't yet turned into the battleground it sometimes feels like today. Suburban development boomed across the decade. New subdivisions sprang up with wide driveways and tidy backyards. Streets quickly filled with kids, basketball hoops, and overflowing mailboxes. For middle-class families, the dream of new construction wasn't far-fetched. Builders marketed directly to middle-income households, and many found themselves in brand-new neighborhoods. By the mid-90s, McMansions began to appear. Oversized two-story homes with vaulted ceilings and three-car garages caught the eye. It wasn't about necessity, it was about aspiration. Families stretched their budgets a little further for houses that looked impressive from the curb, even if the echo inside revealed just how much space they'd taken on. Magazines like Time, Newsweek, and National Geographic stacked neatly on coffee tables. Affordable subscriptions made them a staple, signaling that families stayed informed and connected to a world beyond the cul-de-sac. Flipping through glossy pages on a Saturday morning felt like a ritual of middle-class life. The evening news at 6:30 was another ritual. Parents sipped coffee or balanced dinner plates while anchors recapped the day. Kids half listened, waiting for sitcoms. There were no push alerts, no social feeds, just one trusted half-hour broadcast. Families got their world in 30 minutes, then turned the channel to laughter and scripted stories. The rhythm of life was steady, and information had its place. Cable TV bills in the mid-1990s averaged about $25 to $30 a month, roughly $50 to $60 today. That price bought dozens of channels, CNN, MTV, ESPN luxuries compared to the old rabbit ears. Families argued over the remote, recorded shows on VCRS, and discovered both the joy and frustration of channel surfing. Premium add-ons like HBO and Showtime felt extravagant. A few extra dollars on the bill, unlocking boxing matches, exclusive movies, and late-night specials kids weren't supposed to see. Not every family splurged, but when they did, it felt like true luxury. HBO was the crown jewel of pay TV, a middle-class treat just beyond the basics. Saturday mornings in the 90s belonged to kids and their cartoons. Parents let them pile on the couch with cereal bowls, while Bugs Bunny, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Animaniacs lit up the screen. For adults, it was a rare hour of peace coffee steaming, newspaper open, and the house blissfully quiet. Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, and Cartoon Network quickly became cable staples. Nickelodeon offered slime and sitcoms. Disney gave families safe fun. And Cartoon Network mixed classics with fresh hits. Parents grumbled about cable bills, but secretly loved the reliable kids' programming. By Saturday evenings, channel flipping between cartoons and family comedies was a routine all its own. Internet chat rooms became the hangout spot for middle-class teens. Alal Yuahu and MSN buzzed with screen names and endless abbreviations. ACE-L was typed more times than anyone could count. Parents didn't really understand, but kids spent hours talking to strangers who felt like friends. Glowing computer screens quietly replaced neighborhood streetlights as the backdrop for teenage connection. Before cell phones were affordable, kids carried pagers. A beep and a number flashing across a tiny screen meant a call to mom, dad, or a waiting friend at a payphone. Teens clipped them to belts as status symbols. Looking back, it seems clunky, but in the 90s, a pager was cool. By the mid-90s, all key Ds flooded mailboxes, promising 500 free hours of internet. Families stacked them near the family computer, each disk a shiny golden ticket to the dial-up screech and the thrill of chat rooms. Kids popped them in like treasure, while parents sighed as the phone line tied up. That cheap CD became the bridge to an entirely new world. Middle-class families often had backyard pools, sometimes in ground. More often those big above-ground circles with blue liners and wobbly ladders. They weren't glamorous, but on hot summer days, nobody cared. Kids splashed, dads grilled, and moms carried out lemonade. Neighbors showed up with towels in hand, because back then, a pool was a magnet for community. Suburban garages overflowed with tools, bikes, and sports gear, maybe with a half-finished project in the corner. The workbench smelled of WD-40, rafters stored camping gear, and few cars actually fit inside. For middle-class families, the garage was more than storage, it was a workshop, a clubhouse, and a place where dads taught kids how to swing a hammer. Vacations didn't mean luxury resorts. For most, it was Disney, the beach, or a road trip to national parks. Families packed minivans with coolers, maps, and kids arguing in the back seat. Sandy feet, disposable cameras, and souvenir T-shirts became the markers of those trips. It was less about price tags and more about shared memories. By the late 90s, budget airlines like Southwest offered cheaper flights, making the sky accessible to families who once only traveled by car. It wasn't glamorous, but it got you to grandma's or the beach fast. Photo labs at Walmart and Walgreens turned rolls of film into glossy stacks of pictures for just a few bucks. 1 hour development felt lightning fast. Families filled albums, frames, and shoeboxes with double prints. Looking back, the patience seems unreal, but at the time, it was everyday magic. Middle-class kids carried Jansport backpacks stuffed with Lisa Frank folders and squeaky Trapper keepers. Those binders, decorated with wild designs, held notes passed in class alongside homework. Back-to-school shopping at Target or Office Max wasn't just about supplies, it was about showing off style in the hallways. Levi's jeans sold for about $30 in 1995, around $60 today. They weren't designer, but they lasted. Every kid had a pair paired with a flannel or sneakers. Levi's became the great equalizer. Affordable, durable, and stylish enough to walk the halls with pride. Graduations in the 90s often ended with backyard parties and potluck dinners. Folding tables sagged under potato salad, fried chicken, and sheet cakes with names iced in bright frosting. It wasn't about extravagance. It was about celebrating milestones, the middle-class way, simple, proud, and shared with family and friends. Neighbors and relatives gathered with disposable cameras in hand, snapping pictures of milestones. No elaborate venues, no catering contracts, just family, friends, and enough food to feed the block. Parents tucked away envelopes of layaway receipts from Kmart or Walmart, especially during the holidays. Paying little by little, they eventually walked out with toys, clothes, or electronics without sinking into debt. For many middle-class families, layaway wasn't just convenient. It was the only way to make Christmas morning shine. Those envelopes and kitchen drawers told their own story. Christmas shopping meant trips to Toys R Us and mall toy stores, aisles stacked with board games, action figures, and Barbie dolls. Parents hid bags in closets, while kids circled favorites in catalogs at home. Budgets were tight, but the season still felt magical. For children, the store itself was Wonderland enough. Tamagotchis, Beanie Babies, and Power Rangers defined the toy craze of the 90s. They weren't luxury, they were everywhere. Parents hunted shelves before they sold out, and living rooms filled with digital pets, stuffed animals, and plastic heroes that made Christmas lists grow longer. Magazines gave middle-class households their rhythm. Dads often subscribed to Sports Illustrated, while moms leaned toward Good Housekeeping or Better Homes and Gardens. Stacks of issues on coffee tables offered more than reading. They reflected what mattered most: scores from weekend games, recipes to try, and decorating tips to keep homes tidy and comfortable. Many families still shared just one bathroom in the 90s. Morning routines meant lines outside the door, knocks, and negotiations over mirror space. Kids brushed teeth shoulder to shoulder while parents rushed through showers. It wasn't ideal, but families made it work. Somehow, everyone still got out the door on time, even if tempers flared in the scramble. Phone tricks were second nature. Star 69 called back the last number. Star 67 blocked your caller ID. Homes didn't have smartphones, but they had these codes memorized. At the time, it felt like high-tech magic, just a few extra digits, and you could hide your call or satisfy curiosity. By the 1990s, central air spread through more middle-class homes. No more sweltering nights with fans or noisy window units. The hum of a sea became the sound of comfort across suburbia. It wasn't a luxury anymore. It was expected. Assigned families had made it into stable middle-class living. Columbia House and BMG CD clubs lured families with promises like 12 CDs for a penny. Mailboxes overflowed with jewel cases Garth Brooks, Mariah Carey, Nirvana. Parents grumbled about shipping costs, but kids built their music collections this way. Towers of CDs stacked in bedrooms and living rooms told the story of a family's taste and budget, each jewel case a little badge of identity. By the late 90s, leasing cars took off. Families swapped sedans and minivans every few years instead of holding on to them forever. It wasn't always the smartest long-term deal, but it felt modern and manageable. Leasing gave middle-class driveways a steady rotation of shiny models, proof of progress without breaking the bank. Vacations were often financed with modest credit card use. A Disney trip or a beach week might sit on a Visa bill for a few months, but balances stayed smaller than today. Interest rates hovered around 18%, steep but manageable because families didn't juggle endless subscriptions or surprise fees. Cards were tools for vacations, TVs, or back-to-school shopping. Debt existed, but it didn't feel crushing. For middle-class families, plastic was a tool, not yet a trap. Suburban block parties brought neighborhoods together with potlucks, slip-and-slides, and sparklers. Streets closed down, boom boxes blasted, and folding tables sagged under casseroles. Parents mingled while kids raced bikes down the road. It was community at its best, casual, friendly, and filled with the kind of togetherness that feels rare today. Middle-class teens often picked up part-time jobs at grocery stores, movie theaters, or Blockbuster. Paychecks were modest, but enough for gas, clothes, or the latest CDs. Parents encouraged it, believing work built character. Those jobs were often the first taste of responsibility customer service mixed with perks like free rentals or discounted snacks. Most households still had just one family computer, usually set in the living room or basement. Kids typed reports in WordPerfect, parents checked news, and sometimes the whole family gathered to play solitaire. Dial-up minutes were fought over like TV time. That one computer was less personal device, more shared household appliance. Camcorders were another big middle-class investment, costing $800 to $1,200, then about $1,600 to $2,400 today. They captured soccer games, birthday parties, and graduations. Footage lived on wobbly VHS tapes, shaky but priceless. Families knew the quality wasn't perfect, but that didn't matter. They were recording memories, moments still tucked away in attics today. Compact disc players became standard in middle-class households by the mid-1990s. A solid stereo system cost around $200 to $300, about $400 to $600 today. Towers of jewel cases lined shelves, filled with everything from Garth Brooks to Nirvana. Hitting play felt futuristic compared to tape decks, letting families enjoy music without the hiss. School lunches in the 90s carried Lunchables, Capri Sun pouches, or maybe a thermos of soup. Kids sat in noisy cafeterias, trading pudding cups and chips like currency. Parents felt good, knowing a couple dollars stretched far, while kids felt independent opening those plastic trays of crackers, cheese, and little slices of ham. Computer desks with sliding keyboard trays became suburban furniture staples. Every middle-class home had one tucked in the living room or basement. The bulky monitor perched on top, the tower hung below, and the squeaky tray slid in and out. It wasn't just furniture. It was the family's portal to the future. Printers in the 90s were slow, noisy beasts. Dot matrix models clattered out pages with perforated edges, later replaced by sputtering inkjets. Families groaned when a paper jammed at midnight. Cartridges already felt expensive, but printing at home still beat a late-night trip to Kinko's. Every kid knew the whine of a printer finishing a school project. Projects often included clip art from Microsoft Works pixelated globes, stars, or cartoon pencils pasted beside essays. Teachers didn't mind. It looked high-tech at the time. Parents hovered nearby, making sure margins were straight. Nothing said 90s middle class like a science fair poster decorated with glossy printed clip art. Saturday mornings often meant yard sales. Handwritten signs on telephone poles led to driveways filled with old toys, lamps, and VHS tapes. A few bucks bought armfuls of treasures, and the whole event doubled as a neighborhood gathering. Bargain hunting was a weekend ritual of middle-class life. Caller ID boxes with glowing green screens sat beside household phones. Suddenly, families could see who was calling before answering. Kids raced to check the display, parents dodged telemarketers, and everyone wondered how much more advanced phones could possibly get. Call waiting and three-way calling became must-have add-ons. A beep in the middle of a conversation meant another call, and juggling both felt sophisticated. Teens used three-way calling to gossip with two friends at once, plotting plans without hogging the house line. Phone companies charged extra, but for middle-class families, it felt worth the price. VCRS gave families the power to record TV shows, carefully labeling the spines of blank tapes. Stacks of Seinfeld, E! and Friends episodes lined living rooms. Nobody could skip commercials, but fast-forwarding with that clunky remote felt empowering. Taping shows meant bending schedules around family life, not the other way around. CD towers and cassette racks stood tall like trophies in living rooms. Jewel cases gleamed under lamplight Garth Brooks next to Nirvana, Celine Dion beside Pearl Jam. Teenagers displayed their stacks proudly, while parents insisted on keeping them alphabetized. Music wasn't streaming. It was stacked, shuffled, and shown off. Chain restaurants like Olive Garden, Applebee's, and Red Lobster became staples of family dining. Entrees cost $7 to $12 back, then about $14 to $24 today. Birthdays, good report cards, or just a Friday night called for breadsticks, bottomless salad, or cheddar biscuits. It wasn't fancy, but it was a treat. Everyone left full and happy. Family cookouts meant cheap hot dogs, burgers, and bulk soda from Costco. Dads manned the grill while kids tossed frisbees and squirt guns. Neighbors wandered over with chips or potato salad. Nobody counted calories. It was about filling plates and stretching summer nights. A Packard Bell desktop in 1995, complete with clunky monitor and tower, sold for about $1,500, nearly $3,000 today. Families set them up in basements or living rooms, where they felt like spaceships had landed. Word processing, dial-up internet, a few games suddenly, the middle-class home had a new centerpiece. The Sony Trinitron TV was another point of pride. In 1995, one cost about $600, equal to $1,200 today. Heavy as a boulder, but the picture was clear and bright. Families gathered around it for primetime shows, ball games, and Saturday morning cartoons. It became the glowing heart of the living room. Nike Air Jordans were the crown jewel of 90s sneakers, running about $120 in 1995, or nearly $240 today. Middle-class kids begged parents for Air Jordans, and some managed to get a pair, proudly showing them off at school. They weren't just shoes, they were status symbols, connecting playground games to NBA glory. By the late 90s, MSN Messenger and AIM had become lifelines for teens. After dinner, they rushed to the family computer, logged on, and waited for the satisfying door creak sound of friends arriving online. Status messages, song lyrics, and cryptic away notes filled the screen. For kids, it wasn't just chatting. It was how friendships lived after school. Warehouse clubs like Sam's Club and Costco exploded in popularity. Families rolled carts heavy with bulk toilet paper, giant ketchup bottles, and freezer packs of chicken. Free samples made Saturdays feel like small feasts. Membership cards were flashed with pride because saving money in bulk felt like the new smart way to shop. DIY culture thrived as Home Depot and Lowe's turned into weekend destinations. Dads hauled lumber, moms picked paint swatches, and kids grabbed hot dogs from the cart outside. Families patched drywall, built decks, and laid tile themselves. Doing it yourself wasn't just about saving money. It was a badge of suburban pride. Backyards echoed with the squeak of rusty swing sets, the bounce of trampolines, and the thump of basketballs on driveways. Some setups were store-bought, others pieced together by handy parents. Summer days stretched into evenings, kids only coming inside when the streetlights blinked on. These simple backyards became playgrounds of middle-class childhood. In 1995, cell phones were still luxury items. A Motorola flip phone cost nearly $1,000, about $2,000 today. Most families didn't own one. Phones stayed in the kitchen, cords and all. Carrying one in your pocket was something out of movies or reserved for business executives. Cordless phones and answering machines were the true household essentials. Every kitchen counter had a handset with a telescoping antenna, every hallway table a little black box blinking with messages. After dinner, families checked the machine to hear reminders, greetings, or a dentist appointment. Simple, reliable communication, and it worked. Saturday nights often meant bowling alleys alive with families. Shoes squeaked, pins crashed, pitchers of soda or beer sat on the tables. By the late 90s, glow-in-the-dark bowling turned lanes into neon playgrounds. It was affordable, fun, and brought together kids, parents, and even grandparents. Summer evenings carried the sound of ice cream trucks creeping through neighborhoods, jingles echoing from blocks away. Kids sprinted with coins and crumpled dollar bills, lining up for bomb pops, choco tacos, and drumsticks. Parents didn't mind the interruption. It was tradition. That familiar tune still stirs memories of carefree suburban summers. The garage fridge was another middle-class staple, always stocked with sodas, juice boxes, and freezer pops. It kept the main fridge from overflowing, and kids knew exactly where to run after bike rides or ball games. That second fridge meant comfort. It meant you had enough to share. To avoid tying up the main phone line with dial-up screeches, many families paid for a second line. Parents, tired of missing important calls, saw it as a necessary extra bill. It was proof that the internet wasn't just a novelty anymore. It had truly arrived in middle-class homes. Unlike DVDs that came later, VHS box sets only held 1 or 2 episodes per tape. Collecting a full season was bulky and expensive. Families picked their favorites and re-watched them endlessly. Shelves filled with chunky tapes and rewinding rentals before returning them was a universal chore. Drive-in theaters still lingered in small towns through the 90s, offering families a cheap night out. Parents packed blankets in coolers, kids climbed onto car hoods, and the screen glowed against the night sky. Admission was just a few dollars per car. It wasn't glamorous, but it was magic. A fading slice of Americana that middle-class families cherished while it lasted.